Okay, we're in the office today. Just want to do a real quick video on why you should choose to use a Mac for all of your design development, basically everything. A lot of times I hear that Macs won't do this, Macs won't do that. I've been using a Mac now for at least 10 years. Previously used PCs before, pretty heavily in software development on the PC world. And about 10 years ago, that all changed when everything moved to the cloud, moved to the servers. And even the hardware design has all moved to either Linux or Mac. I don't see a lot of PC work anymore. I know people are still using it. So this video is pretty much just to show you why you shouldn't do it and the alternative way, usually the faster way. So I'll get right to it. One of the things that I did a few years ago was a hardware, software, machining design. And I'm just going to go over that real quick. It's based on the STM32. As you can see here, this is a STM32 Cube MX. It's running on a Mac. They have been distributing Mac-based tools now for a while. Scilabs and a couple other vendors have done the same. It's just easier to use. Pretty much always works. There's no installation order that you have to worry about. You can uninstall, reinstall, move. A lot easier than you can on any of the other platforms. So this is the tool that I usually use for the 32-bit platform. I also had some STM8 components as well, and those were done using the 8-bit compiler. You can download it. It's SDCC, and it works perfectly with CLine and or on the command line. Generally, I use that on the command line. Unless I'm starting a new project, I may load it into CLine just for speed of typing. So another tool that I'll use on the Mac is Keycap. This is the design for that piece of hardware. I'm just kind of go in here. This is the board file for that project. If you don't know what this is and you're interested, you can check out some of my other videos. I did a whole video series on this whole product development cycle, including software, firmware loading, hardware design, the actual board design, reflowing the board by hand, building a prototype, and machining an enclosure on a 3-axis mill. So that takes us to our 3-axis. So we've got the software portion covered, the tools I'm using, SDCC or STM32 ARM compiler. I'm using the ST Tools package for Mac. And typically I'm either using Xcode, which works pretty well, believe it or not, under STM32, or CLine by JetBrains. So we'll go on to the hardware portion of this. And this is the hardware portion. So basically this is Fusion 360, another very popular application, available on all the platforms. In my experience, it's a lot easier to use on the Mac. It's a lot easier to install and maintain on the Mac. And it just works. You'll hear that a lot when you're talking about the Mac platform. But this interface is just fine. It just generates G-code, and I put that on a USB key, install that in my DNC, plug it into my CNC machine that I have down in the shop, and we milled this this entire enclosure. And it's a 2-piece enclosure. You kind of get a better feel for how it works. So there's a top and a bottom. This is a through hole, and the other side actually has thread milling. I did a version later on when I went into production with this. I did a couple of small production runs where we actually did some form tapping. But all of this was done on Mac using Fusion 360. Some other tools that are really great to have, I know to have these on other platforms, is an editor. And I typically am using it just as a straight editor, mostly Sublime, some VS Code. Both of those applications run very well on Mac. This is Sublime here. As you can see, it works just as good on the Mac as it does any other platform. And this is typically what I've seen other developers using, either Sublime or VS Code. A little bit less IntelliJ, PHP Storm, etc. That's the whole JetBrains platform. I've started using it a lot more because what I've found is it still gets out of your way when you want to use the command line, which for me it's quite often because a lot of times I'm deploying these into the CI/CD processes and trying to keep track of releases, etc. So those are all command line driven. And the JetBrains product really gets out of your way. It will import on an STM32. If you have it in another IDE and it generates an IOC file, it will import that. Generally, I try to stick with CMake, and it will definitely import CMake projects and stay out of your way. And it provides an IDE if you want to use those features, or it can be just an editor, either one. So I find that real comfortable. And again, this is all I'm kind of showing you. There's nothing you can't write on a Mac. The one benefit that you get is that you can actually build. The one thing that you'll miss, no matter how you go about it, is if you're not on Mac, you're not going to be writing iOS apps or Mac apps. Now, I don't have that many Mac apps other than the utilities I've written, but I have iOS apps in the store, and those you have to have a Mac to build. I can still build Android. Android Studio works perfectly on Mac. A lot of Android developers use it, and obviously, if you're bringing in assets that are media, the whole Creative Suite from Adobe's underneath it. I've gotten really used to using Affinity Designer or the Affinity product line to do a lot of the design work. They have really good artboards available for iOS icon creation, etc. I found myself basically have switched wholesale to that. I like it a little bit better. I do still have the Adobe Creative Suite on my machine, but again, that's a subscription that you have to maintain. The Affinity products are a perpetual license, so basically you buy a license. You get updates for so long, and then if you want to keep up getting updates, you can spend more money. Another really popular app that I use, again, is subscription-based for a lot of app development and just general software design is Sketch, and that's pretty much the industry standard and works great on that. Okay, so that's pretty much the full gamut. So we've got STM32 embedded on STM8, which is a 8051 base product. So that uses SDCC, which is available. Big powerful thing on the Mac is the homebrew system. You can pretty much brew anything that you would normally put on Linux. The big difference being is it doesn't really, it kind of keeps it all in a sandbox and it makes it maintainable. So you can have multiple versions of Python, you can have multiple versions of PHP, etc. And you really can't do that very easily on Linux. Python's possible with a virtual environment, but that's way more difficult to set up than simply just doing homebrew. So that's one reason you see a lot of developers using Mac. So we've obviously got iOS development with Xcode. I'm not going to show that because if you've got a Mac anyway, you already know what Xcode is. It's pretty much their development environment for anything related to Mac. And it also makes a good editor. It will edit C files, etc., Objective-C, and obviously Swift. Everything that I'm currently writing and everything I have in the store, I have ported over to Swift. I just like Swift. It's way easier to maintain, read the code, especially if you write some code and need to come back to it 6 months later. Way easier to read than any Objective-C application I've done. For web development, per se, the main two things I have experience in is Spring Angular and PHP Laravel. So those two things, PHP Storm, where you can install command line tools, Composer, obviously PHP, you can use the artisan tools that come with a lot of those packages. IntelliJ works very good for Java development, and that also runs perfectly on a Mac. One thing I do like about IntelliJ and JetBrains, you spend less time than you would if you were on Linux, especially on the command line, trying to keep up packages. It kind of gives you hints, especially if you don't have a lot of experience, so it allows you to get up to speed really fast. And when you deliver that project to someone else that does have a lot of experience, even if they're not using one of the JetBrains products, they can still build a project and get it running. That's super important for like DevOps. You can build a project and give that to your DevOps team, and they'll be able to deploy it without a lot of external dependencies other than what's dependent inside the project. For like Laravel, PHP Storm works beautiful. You can actually either create the Laravel project using the command line tools and then load PHP Storm, or you can actually go in and use one of their templating engines to bring in Laravel and run all the necessary commands. I've found both work very well, which is unusual. Most IDEs kind of mess things up, but they did a really good job about keeping compatible with the command line tools so you know what happened. So that pretty much covers the full gamut. That's every imaginable platform. And I mentioned like Scilabs. Scilabs has all of their tools, all their modern tools available now in the Mac platform if you're doing any kind of RF development, etc. But these days, in the development world, when I see folks, you kind of see three flavors of people. Those that are still on Windows, which usually doesn't work very well. Those are on Linux, which that is a very popular thing, and you have to deal with Linux no matter what, generally on deployments. And Linux is very good at server-type operations. I hate having to deal with Linux on the desktop, and mainly because I won't say that OS X is without a bug, but definitely it's more polished than any Linux device driver / desktop manager that's available for Linux. Lots of little issues, like my Mac, for example. I can plug up to a monitor and be assured that it's going to recognize the monitor, load the monitor, work. If I close my laptop lid, it's going to do what it's supposed to do. 90% of the time, any Linux machine that I've had, it just doesn't do well with like hop swap type devices, monitors. A lot of times Bluetooth, even wireless is kind of iffy to stay connected and reconnect and etc. A lot of competing tools are trying to do your wireless settings. With Mac, you don't have to worry about it. It's all under one umbrella. The Mac's also FreeBSD based, so it's already Linux underneath. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good idea of why use Mac to do development. Pretty much full gamut, and if you disagree, I'd like to hear your comments down below. I'm sure there will be some disagreement, but I've been doing this for a long time, and I get exposure to a lot of wide variety of technologies. And for me and for most other people that I know, this is not just within one organization. This is kind of traveling around, doing some freelance work, etc. Macs seem to be it. There's most of the argument that I hear on Linux is, the hardware's cheaper, I can build my own PC, and I can change things. Well, in a commercial world where you're trying to get the most efficiency possible, in my experience, and I haven't seen anyone prove this wrong, that never works out. Macs are faster, easier to use for development purposes. You don't have to fool with it, it just kind of works. Anyway, I hope this helps some folks out, especially if you're just now getting into programming or thinking about switching over to Mac. And just to let you know that everything pretty much is possible on the Mac platform. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.